Monday, January 11th, 2021. This is Empty with K-Raz. Thank you for joining me once again. Before I get started, this show is brought to you by Midtown ABC, opening soon in Lake Carolina and Solar Station. It is the spirit of Midtown. As always, the music you hear in the background, I do not own it. I just love to listen to it. Today's podcast will probably be a little spirited from me because I am about to talk about the state of our educational system with our black boys. I'm going to start with this word, ineptitude, lack of skill or ability. What do I mean by that? I mean the leadership of our country has not done anything in reference to this other epidemic that's in this country, and it is the education of young black boys, or lack thereof. There are decades of data that speak to a particular situation in our education system that we've not addressed. With such a glaring weakness in our education system, you would think that someone at a very high level would identify this and identify a problem. I'm 50 and I struggled in school long ago, and the problem still exists. Some education facts about black boys. And this is from our Department of Education. Black boys are more likely to be placed in special education than any other gender or race. 80% of all special education students are either black males or Hispanic males. Black boys are more likely to attend schools without the adequate resources to educate them more than any other gender or race. Black boys are not reading at an adequate level. In 2014, the Black Star Project published findings that just 10% of 8th grade black boys in the U.S. are considered proficient in reading. I don't know if you heard this, but I heard this growing up. If you ever want to hide anything from a black man, you put it in a book. It's a common theme I'm seeing. Punishment for black boys are more harsh than any other demographic in schools. Even first-time offenders in school, black boys are punished harder. Why? I've always heard that people have this natural fear of black boys and black men, well, in particular black men, but the way you stop black men from being intimidated is you stop them as boys, right? You try to eliminate your enemy as early as you can. Now, who exactly would be the enemy? That could be a lot of different people, and it can come from a lot of different places. Listen to this. Black boys, in particular, make up just 18% of children in the U.S. preschools, but make up half of those youngsters who are suspended. Wow. Black boys in rural areas are considered doomed from conception by some experts. Yeah, what experts? So most people are no strangers to my education journey. I'm a pretty transparent guy. I'm always talking about what my failures was like as a kid, as a boy in school. I was extremely intimidated by school. My siblings did very well in school. And of course, my two sisters are black. But my brother and my two sisters were going to be good in education just because that's who they were. I was cut kind of different. I knew what I wanted to accomplish. I could see the end, but again, I hated the process. I didn't understand the process. Some of that didn't make sense to me. So in school, I would struggle. I could read better than most because my mom would make me read everything that I was asking for as far as something to eat. Cookies, chips, drink, milk, cereal, canned goods, whatever it is. My mom loved to read and she passed that on to me. But in school, I just couldn't get the concept of learning. I don't know what it was. I would study countless hours. And it's like when I got there to put it all together, it just never clicked. So even as a kid, I would ask the teachers for help. I would just tell them that I didn't understand. And that school should be a place where you can do that without judgment. But for me, that wasn't the case. Teachers just said some things to me that I would never say to any of my students or to any of your children. Things were extremely demeaning. And I understand I was a boy in school in the 70s. So, paddling, popping with rulers, all of that stuff was still free game. So imagine how the mouths of some of those teachers were. But I struggled and I couldn't get help. And most of my teachers knew my parents. They were friends of my parents. So, some of the teachers, I'm assuming, felt they were in a role where they could talk to me like that. Like they had that authority to talk to me like that. And my parents, they taught me how to be tough, how to deal with adversity. And later in my life, of course, that came into play and it helped me a lot. But in school, it didn't help me. No matter what I did, I just couldn't get it. And then because I felt shut down every time I asked for help, and hearing things from some of my teachers, and some of them tell me, you're not going to get this anyway, so just don't worry about it. And most of them passed me. Now, I made D's all the way, C's, whatever the case may be, nothing over a C. But rather than help me, they passed me by. Felt that I was a waste of their time. I was beneath them. And that's how they treated me. So I began to really hate school. If my parents wasn't so tough, I know I would have strayed, especially the neighborhood I lived in. I would have went and did some other things that some of the folks in my neighborhood were doing, but I just had that kind of respect for my parents that I didn't do it. But I can see how these young black boys are straying to that. Them showing up, a teacher opening their door. They should also be opening their minds and their arms to embrace no matter who comes through the door. But that wasn't the case. And sadly, the data is still showing that's still not the case for black boys. I always talk to educators about what solutions can we come up with this. So I study a lot. Yeah, the guy who struggled in school. If you come in my man cave, you'll see tons of books on all types of subjects. I majored in psychology because I wanted to find out, how the mind works and if it was that different for everybody else. I have a lot of friends and mentees that wrote books as well as myself, and I have them in here to understand other people's psyche, other black men's psyche, and what was school like for them as boys, and was it as rough for me? And some of them just grew up in rough areas. But school wasn't as rough for most of them as it was for me. I began to get physically sick Sunday morning, knowing that I had to go to school on Monday. All day in school, I would have that feeling in my stomach. That sick burning in my throat. That nasty taste in my mouth the whole time I'm in school. Scared to death, teacher gonna call on me. And just to use me as, a punchline. We have to stop educating black boys in pockets. I grew up in an area that wasn't affluent, but I didn't know it was an area that wasn't affluent just because of the people who are around me. They embraced education because they know that that's the way out. Not that you had to ascend to a doctorate degree, but you had to know how to read. You had to know mathematics. And they believed in it made a way for you. So many of my relatives, it did. But just the basics of formal education is how our society is supposed to evolve and thrive. So why is there one segment of society not thought of like everyone else? I've heard people, well, black boys are just dumb, or they just don't get it. Well, why don't we really look at it for what it is? Perhaps they learn differently. Look at the majority of athletes. They use their natural ability to be great. And most great athletes are black men. Most. They apply themselves differently. We have to remember the education system that we all grew up in began in the 1860s. So think about who that system was designed for. Some people are going to see or hear this and see it as, okay, I'm coming from a racial standpoint. I'm coming from a factual standpoint. The data shows us this in every level of the Department of Education. So my thing is this. What are some of the solutions? The solution to me, again, is to stop educating in pockets. What do I mean by that? Because the majority of black boys who are in school do not have access to the resources that can cater to their talents, to their abilities, and to give them the basic knowledge that they need. But let him be a great basketball player, football player, track star, and he will get all of the weight training, all of the skills training, whatever is needed from whatever institution or organization just because they want to win. And the crazy thing to me is they'll tell them, well, you got to get your education to go to the next level to do this. But at the same time, there is a large group of them that are hindered. If you took away the athletic ability of most of the great athletes that we see and we watch in college football and college basketball and college track, if you took that ability away, that school would not need that person. That's we just calling it what it is. They give them the resources to be the greatest, as great as they can be, as long as it gives them something. Right, a whole different animal there. You know, that opens up a lot of different things. You know, why aren't athletes paid? You know, they're making money off of them and their success, Well, we give them an education. No, you give them resources to get you what you need. Let's be honest there. We look at some of these neighborhoods and some of these communities, and they have almost $1 billion school with all types of resources, and it can do all of these things, has all of this technology, and just 20, 30 miles away is a school with no resources, high level of grade retention, low reading levels, very little books. Technology, you can forget it. So one of the solutions I was always wondering about, why is education not streamed to them? Why is there not a Promethean board in a classroom with a teaching assistant? If a teacher, if you can't afford a teacher, or a teacher doesn't want to be in an area without resources, why can't you stream some of these highly certified teachers teaching these lessons directly to those kids who can see them, and the teacher can see them? We're in a virtual world right now as far as education, so why can't we do that? We're proving it every day. We're not doing it because they are okay with the segment of people, black boys, who are not as successful in education. They don't fear young black females as much as they fear young black males. An educated black man is a dangerous man to the world for whatever reason. They really alienate black women, but they go out of their way to hinder and not help. When I say hinder, I mean not help, which is also hindering. An educated black man in a boardroom has to be careful of how he responds to things, because he doesn't want to intimidate anybody or think that he is losing control. Why? Why are black boys so alienated? Stream education to our poor communities. Stream education to the rural and the urban communities that lack those resources. We can't sit and say, well, there's not a strong enough tax base. Forget that. Why is education not the same everywhere? If it's not the same everywhere, it shouldn't be anywhere. Public education is what we use to evolve as a society. So what are we saying? If we're looking at all of these decades of data that says black boys are not doing well, what are we saying because we haven't addressed it yet? We don't want black men or black boys to be a part of our society? We don't want them to be leaders in our society? We look at schools like Penn Center that educated slaves as slavery was ending. The school had to be on a coast to educate because the threat of the school being demolished, burned down, all of them being killed because they're educating. Why? We owe it to black boys to find a solution to this problem. And that solution is to not put them on one track that's going to educate a particular gender and race. We need to individualize education. And we can't say that we can't afford it when we can afford to start and be a part of wars. We can send aid all over the world, but we can't help educate black boys who are just as smart, just as talented, and just as deserving as everybody else. It's time we end that. We can be better than that. I am one of less than 2% of black male teachers who are in our public school system. My desire was to go back out and to open a school for black boys. And the reason I saw that I shouldn't is I looked at that data and I looked at how successful not just black boys, but all children are when a black male teacher is in the room, in the classroom. Not disciplinarian, not running ISS and all these other discipline things that they think we are. We're not all just coaches. We can teach core subjects, math, science, social studies, English. We can teach high-level courses, accounting, entrepreneurship, computing. We can teach that. And the fact that so many of our teachers for those subjects are black male teachers, now we have students who want to become entrepreneurs, but also still understand that education is very important, whether you start a business or working in one. Black boys can do more than catch a football, dribble a basketball, or run fast on a track. And we have to begin to show them, and we show them by standing up for them and telling education they're not successful at reaching all of our children. There are other things that we can do to help black boys. The state of our education system right now is failing them, the majority of them. I understand, no matter how great a teacher is, if that child is not prepared to be educated when he comes in the door, there's nothing that teacher can do. If they don't want to be educated, there's nothing that teacher can do. They can try to influence them. They can try. But the change has to happen within the student. And that happens from his community on. When I was in school in the late 60s and early 70s, they did what they was known as busing students from one area to another, right? When they desegregated schools. Some elder black men will tell you one of the worst things that ever happened was when they desegregated schools. I did a podcast that talked about Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street had one of the most successful education systems for black students in the country. Almost literally in the history of the country. That education system taught students individually. It taught them formal education, but it taught them survival. It taught them how to heighten and help and heighten their instincts. That education system is missing. It was created for black boys and black girls. So when it was desegregated, now they went into a system that was not designed for them, and that has not been changed yet. Do not be fooled by looking at a whole bunch of different programs they have for them. And like I said, some students, some kids are going to be successful no matter what education system you put them in. But for the great majority of them, there's a lot they will not understand. We have to identify some successful education tracks to put our exceptional, talented, and for our struggling black boys. We have to do it. The time is now. Interesting fact that I found. The generation of black boys today, the current young generation that's being born now, is quite possibly the first generation in the history of the world to be less educated than the generations before them. We have to help them. I'm going to help them. I hope you can help me. Inspiring quote: teachers open the door, but you must enter by yourself. Preview of our next show: what has technology done to our black boys? Thank you for joining me today. Live life empty or live life until empty. Until next time, I'm K. Raz.